This recording, yeah, the recording started. So I think after the session, we can also post this recording somewhere on the web so that everybody would be
Okay.
able to listen it.
Great.
And just for the introduction, Purpose Namala is the well-known author of the OCA book, OCA Java certification book that has been published from the Manning. And she is also going to publish another book maybe in December. That is for the OCP Java 7 certification. So, and also we are actually thankful to Mala because she has also provided one copy of her OCA certification book to her DaNJUG members. So if anybody would like to have copy of this book, then you can actually drop a mail to me or the Gurpreet, so we would be able to give you the copy for the reading purpose. So I'll stop for now, and I'll make you the presenter.
Okay.
Fine. So are you able to control it?
Yes, I can see a pop-up. Okay, yes. It's mentions that I am now the presenter.
Yeah, you can actually show your screen. And there is a button, I
Okay,
think. Show my screen.
great. Great. Yes. And I guess Gurpreet has also
Yeah.
joined in. Hi, Gurpreet, can you hear me?
Yeah, Mala, good morning. I'm also there.
Hi,
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm good, thank you. So I'll start with the presentation now.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a moment. Give me a sec. Yes. So this is a session on exception handling, which is specific for the OCA Java SE7 Programmer 1 certification. Sorry, I can't hear anyone. Am I audible?
Yes. I have actually muted my
Yes.
microphone.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so when I say that the presentation is specifically for this particular exam, the difference is that it excludes the topic which are not meant for this exam. The main two topics which I have excluded from this presentation are the try with resources statement and the multi-catch statement, which are new to exception handling in Java 7. So we have a whole lot of points which you learn at the end of the session. I won't go through over the points now, and we'll see how we learn them as we progress with the session. Now, a lot of programmers that I have worked with or I have seen, they try to postpone working with exceptions because I guess there's a phobia and they think, okay, I have a message wherein Aditya is saying that he is not able to hear me. Aditya, is that better now?
I think
You're
I'm able to
audible.
listen.
We can hear you.
Gurpreet, you're also able to listen, Mala, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
Aditya, can you please confirm that your microphone and your speaker is working perfectly? There is a preference setting that you can actually check your microphone and the speaker. Yeah, go ahead, Mala.
Okay, Jitendra, one more question before I start. If I get any message, do I need to pause or will you moderate that? Will you
Yeah,
let
actually,
me know if I have to pause?
I'm actually looking into the chatting stuff. So if there is anything, then I'll definitely ping you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So I was talking about a lot of programmers, they postpone working with exception handling because they think it's um, it's very difficult and it's so and not so important. But as we go through the session, we'll see that it's easy, it's important, it's integral to a programming module. So let's see how I justify these statements. So before we get started, this is a wake-up call for all, if anyone is falling asleep. So these are, I have given faces to the exceptions. So if, how do you think a null pointer exception would look like? It would be like face with a question mark because it doesn't have anything. So similarly, the faces which I've made, so that's just a wake-up call for anyone who's falling asleep. So now we talk about a practical example of exception and how it's handled in real life. Imagine you are at the airport at 7 hours in the morning. You are waiting to board a flight, and after an hour, you are told that the pilot is not available and the flight might be cancelled or delayed. So that's gonna send all the passengers into the panic mode, right? So, but the airline handles the exceptions and arranges for an alternate pilot within an hour so that everyone can board the flight and the flight takes off at the scheduled time. So, who are already on the flight? Can I hear anyone?
Yeah, ma'am.
Is anyone on the flight? I can see 4 faces.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so Jitendra is on the flight and Aditya, who else? 2 are remaining.
It's Vikas.
Vikas, great Vikas. And the last one is me. So all 4 of us, we can go for a holiday or for work, whatever. So it's basically, we talk about how the exception, the exception here is that the airline wouldn't have expected the pilot to get sick, but the pilot does fall sick, and this exception is handled by the airline by arranging for an alternate pilot. And because the exception is handled appropriately, there are no losses to the airlines, there are no losses to the passengers who were traveling, who were supposed to travel by that flight. So if the airline would have failed to plan for that, perhaps it would be planning to fail. So exception handling is important. So that was an example in real life. So this is how you might see exceptions being thrown in code. The line which is bolded, I'll highlight it. So this line would throw an array index out of bounds exception because it's trying to access the array position which doesn't has a value. Then you talk about the file not found exception. Again, this is perhaps trying to access a file which doesn't exist. Now, can I have an example of a code where a null pointer exception is thrown? Again, this one's a wake-up call.
Whenever the reference is null and you are actually calling any method on that null reference.
Great. So Jitendra scores full marks for this.
Thank you.
Great. So by handling exceptions, you can develop robust procedures in application, and to do so, you need to recognize the potential exceptional conditions. The statement might look very obvious, but as we move with the session, you'll identify that it might not be so obvious. And then after you have identified the potential conditions or the exceptions, you have to decide the module, according to the module, you have to handle them or report them to the calling method. Now, the first point is recognizing the potential exceptional condition. Let's go back to the example that we just talked about. We have two conditions. The first one, I'm talking about a tired pilot, and in the other condition, I'm talking about the stomach infection. So, depending on my need, depending on what I think is an exceptional condition, I might treat this as an exception condition or this or both. So after I have identified the exceptional condition, I either handle them or report them. So how do we do that? Now going back to the example, if the airline handles management of the pilots, it would need to handle this exception. It would need to arrange for an alternate pilot itself. But let's imagine a scenario where the airline has outsourced its pilots, the services which are offered by the pilots. Then it can report this exception to the company which provides them with the pilots. So the first one, in this case, it's handling the exception, and in the other case, it's reporting the exception. And when we talk about the code in Java, I can report the exception to the calling method by throwing it back to the calling method. And when I say I handle the exception, I use a catch block and I specify what needs to be done if an exceptional condition is met. So we come to exceptions in Java. An exception, because it's an instance of a class, it's a Java instance. It has a state, a type, and a description. Now we have multiple categories of exceptions. We have runtime exceptions, check exceptions, and the errors. The check exceptions are the exceptions which we can foresee. Let's talk about the file not found exception. It's when I try to write a method which tries to read a file from the system, I can foresee that the file that I'm trying to read might not exist on the system, or it might be it might not be no longer readable. So that would throw an exception, and that would be a checked exception. But for a runtime exception, I do not know whether the code will throw an exception or not until the runtime. As we talked about the null pointer exception, until the code runs, I cannot say whether an instance would refer to a value or not. So if I try to call a method or access an attribute of that reference variable, that would throw a null pointer exception. And the errors, they are the more serious ones. Like you have the initializer error. So we literally can't do much about the errors. I again have a message by Aditya, and I guess he's having issues with the listening properly. He is not able to hear my voice. Okay, so I'll continue. Thanks, Jitendra. So now this is the exception class hierarchy in which exception and error they extend throwable, and the runtime exception extends exception. I won't talk a lot about it because I believe that the attendees of this session they are quite comfortable with these classes. So we have another reason of handling the exceptions separately. The first was that it's an integral part of a module because you need to handle the exception that arises or report it to the calling method so that your application doesn't stop working abruptly. Now the other benefit of using exception handling and the try catch block is that the code that you have is much more readable. It is not lost in having a lot of if and else statements. Now compare this code with this code. That's a simple set of lines to access a website, log in, select some page to comment on, and to post the comments. So any of these processes can throw an exception. So if any process throws an exception, that the control is transferred to the appropriate catch block. But if we go back to the earlier code where the code is trying to validate the availability of a resource before moving on to the next one, we see that the code flow, the logic is actually lost. So I'm trying to highlight the points here.
Mala, I have a question here.
Yes.
How you would compare a if block and exception, like the post-wise, like which is more preferable or most recommended in the post-wise post and the post?
Because I'm sorry to interrupt, but the voice is not too clear and I'm not able to
Actually,
make
there is a
what you
background noise
just.
because in your microphone. So if you can actually speak a little louder.
Is it clear now?
Can you please speak a little
It's
louder?
feeble.
I was asking like
Yeah.
how we can compare this block with a try catch on in the respect of cost of execution. Like which one is preferable? Like you explained, like it would be more readable if we use the exceptions rather than if blocks. But is it a cost effective in the execution, or we should use if like where we can?
Okay,
Uh,
let me restate what I understood because the voice was feeble, so I couldn't make much of it. You are asking what is the difference between using the if statements to verify a condition and using try catch statements. Is that what you're trying to ask?
let me write my question in chat. Maybe I will be more clear. Give me a
Okay,
second.
so if you are writing it down, then it might take some time. So you can write the question, and I'll address it at the end of the session.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay, great, great. Thank you, Vikas. So let's move on to how to throw an exception. So that's the I've coded the example that we talked about the pilot. So we have this method. Yes. I'll highlight that again now. So this is the method which mentions that it throws an exception. And this is the statement which is used to actually throw the exception. So you use a combination of throw and throws to enable a method to report an exception to the calling method. So unwell exception is a custom exception, which means that it extends an exception. So these are the constructors which I have in this class. I'm sorry. So when you try to call the method fly on class pilot, it says if the health status, because this is actually test code. So when you call the method, you need to assign values to current flight and tide. So the method checks if the health status is not null and it's equal to stomach infection, we have to throw an exception, which is the unwell exception. So in this case, the class pilot, when the method fly is called on pilot, it would throw an exception if the value of this variable is equal to a particular value. And this method might be called by the airline class, and which, when it determines that an exceptional condition has occurred, it will act appropriately. As we discussed earlier, it might handle the exception itself, or it might pass it to another class. So we just talked about how to create a method that can throw an exception. Now we need to use that method in another class and to handle the exception which was thrown by it. To do so, we use try, catch, and finally. So the code that we think might throw an exception is enclosed within the try block, and the catch block mentions the exceptions that we are expecting it to throw. And the finally block defines the code that we need to execute irrespective of whether the code throws exception, the try block throws exception or not. Okay, so we have another wake-up call now. So before we move on to discussing how the exceptions change the course of code execution, I'll use an example of river rafting. So how many have actually gone for river rafting? Hi, and that's a wake-up call.
Yeah, not me. I haven't tried it.
Anyone?
I tried it.
Who? Vikas?
Yes,
Okay, where was it?
in Shivpuri.
Oh wow. And anyone else? Gurpreet? Aditya?
I also fall down.
Oh wow, the first rapid or the next ones?
Final one, the roller coaster one.
Oh wow. Great. So Gurpreet and Aditya? I guess they've gone to get a coffee for themselves.
No one there.
Great. So, Gurpreet, have you tried river rafting? No, yes.
Not done yet.
Okay. Great. Aditya, what about Aditya?
Aditya, I think Aditya left because he was not able to listen. Maybe he might be joining again. But Gurpreet and me, I think we should try river rafting now, because I was also thinking that I wanted to do the river rafting, but
Uh-huh.
maybe in future definitely I would do that.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
certainly.
should definitely go for it.
I wanted to do that.
Sorry, what did Gurpreet say? He doesn't want
I
to?
said certainly we should try that.
Oh yes, it's loads of fun. Loads of
Yeah.
fear, loads of fun. But you'll remember each and every rapid all your life. You can ask Vikas.
Yeah, I remember the roller coaster one.
Great. So we have the Addison team now, right? No. Jitendra is from a different company, guys.
Sorry?
Yeah. So Vikas and I are from Irisent, and Jitendra is from a different company.
I
Okay.
am from iron
Great.
trading.
Oh yes, I completely forgot about him. I'm so sorry.
No issues.
Okay. So let's talk about how the exceptions change the course of code execution. We talk about an example on river rafting. You are going for the river rafting on the vacation, and you have an instructor before you actually start the river rafting, and he will give you a lot of instructions what to do and what not to do. So the first instruction is that if you fall off the raft and you have eyes, like you're staring at him, what? So he said, no, that's very common, and it's often the raft turns, so not an issue. And you are still thinking about whether you should go for it or not, Vikas can tell you. So the first instruction is that if you fall off the raft, uh, they will try to get you back into the raft by using an oar if you are within that distance, or they would throw a rope to you. And people also drop their oar into the river or within the raft because that's quite frightening at times. So, in such condition, a person should not panic and should stay seated. Okay, and whatever happens, now we are coming on to the finally block. Whatever happens, you are paying for the adventure sport. So let's see how we code this. We have two custom exceptions, fall in river exception and drop or exception. Both of them extend exception. Then you have class river rafting. The method cross rapid would throw an exception, fall in river exception, if the degree of the rapid that you're crossing is greater than 10. And row raft method will throw an exception if the state equals nervous. So we have only one condition each for each of these methods when they throw an exception. So let's see how we use this class. We create an instance on line 1. We have an instance of river rafting. We instantiate it. And then on the second line, we have a try block because this is a check exception. When a method throws a check exception, its usage should be enclosed within a try block, or the method that uses that particular method should declare that method to be thrown. Otherwise, if you fail to do either of these, the code won't compile. So the usage of these two methods is enclosed in a try block at line number 3. And because the degree of the rapid is 11, which is greater than 10, so at runtime, line number 3 will throw an exception. So the code will come, the control of the execution would come to line number 7. It will print this line, and then again the control will come to the finally block, and it will print this line. And at the end, it prints this line. Okay. Oh yes. The method cross rapid has a println statement, so that would print this line. So this is how the flow of control gets modified if a method throws an exception. So let's talk about another usage when this line won't throw an exception. In this case, the degree of rapid is 7, so it won't throw an exception. So the code executes like this. We have this line and then this. Because no exception is thrown, the control goes to the next line. So because the person is not nervous, the person is happy, no exceptions here, then you have the code control coming on to the next line. So it prints enjoy river rafting, and then the code will not execute this because no exception was thrown, but the code will execute the finally block. So after it prints enjoy river rafting, it comes to finally block and outputs pay for the sport, and then of course this line which is after the try catch block. It follows the try catch block. So 1 2, this one prints cross rabbit, this one prints row raft, this is enjoy river rafting, this line get back in the raft. No, I'm sorry, this is not printed. I have a cross here. So this is not sent to the console. So this is how the control changes, the lines of code which execute change depending on whether the code throws an exception or not. Okay, so this was the earlier example that we discussed was an example where we handle the exception which was thrown. Now what happens when the exceptions which are thrown are not handled? Let's talk about the class trace. It has the method main and it has two methods, method 1 and method 2. So the execution would start with method main, which calls method 1. Method 1 calls method 2, which throws an exception. As you can see, the array students has 2 instances, refers to 2 instances, and this one's trying to print the value at position 5. So which exception would it throw? Can I hear from you all? Anyone?
Where index of the bounds.
Yes, that's right. So Jitendra is scoring full marks in all the questions, right? Great. So we have a pictorial representation of what happens. So we have the execution starts with the main method. Main calls method 1. So we have the execution of method 1 should end before main is called. Then the method 2 is pushed onto the stack. And when method 2, as we have this line, and this line is supposed to throw an exception, when method 2 throws an exception, and as you can see, this exception is not handled by any of the code. Okay, that's cool. So, okay, we're talking about method 2 is throwing an exception, and because it is not handled by this method, excuse me, so the exception is handed over to the next method in the stack. So this is popped out, and the control, the JVM goes and looks for any handlers if they're present in method 1. And as we just saw, there are no exception handlers in any of the methods. So now the control goes to method 2 and then to method 1. And as you can see, none of the methods handles the exception. So what eventually happens is that JVM stops the execution of this class. So when an exception goes unhandled, no matter whether it's a runtime exception, a checked exception, or an error, an unhandled exception would halt the execution of your class. And that exception could be as simple as a null pointer exception. So you need to be very careful when you code. You need to check the value of variables before you call methods on them or before you try to access their attributes. Okay, so before we go on to the finer details of using try, catch, and finally, I would like to hear from you one example of custom runtime exception that you would create for your in your application, and one example of custom checked exception. Wake up call again. Jitendra and Vikas are off to sleep, seems like.
I am back.
Hi.
I am back.
Oh, I guess only you were listening, and because you were away, no one else was listening. I was trying to ping
No,
them.
I'm
I
there.
was trying to. So how's the coffee?
Sorry?
That was just a joke. I was trying to connect with you. I couldn't, so I just thought that you have gone to get a cup of coffee for yourself. I'm talking about Gurpreet. So now that I heard Gurpreet, I was asking him how's the coffee.
No, actually, I never went anywhere. I was listening. So,
Okay, so I asked, can you give me an example? Because Gurpreet, I read that you have been giving presentations on the garbage collector. So, assuming that you are coding that part yourself, give me an example of one instance where you would like to create custom runtime exception and custom checked exception.
custom runtime exception and custom checked exceptions.
Yes.
So I think checked exceptions as such, generally I have felt that uh, typically, when you see a code where people are trying to use status code or flags and pass it across methods and then use it to, do some logic, I think that is the case when probably they should create their own custom exceptions, check exceptions, rather than dealing with return codes and those kind of stuff. So we should rather throw exceptions in those cases. But I've seen that in general, programmers are quite lazy with respect to exceptions. People don't want to make their own exceptions. I've hardly seen people making their own exceptions. They rely on the inbuilt exceptions only, which the Java library provides.
Very,
Actually,
very true. I completely agree.
that actually
Right.
remind me one thing that when I was actually working in my first company, I was actually reviewing the code of one of the juniors, and I told him that you need to catch the exceptions properly, and you need to throw it back wherever it is required. So then after 2 or 3 days, I reviewed his code again, and he
Mm-hmm.
actually catched all the exceptions on every single line.
Oh,
On every single line of code, he was actually catching some sort of exceptions.
Was he going overboard with that?
Yes, I was actually able to see only the exceptions on the code.
He over-engineered that, didn't he? Great. So
or
next
generally
time
what
you
people
tell
also do.
anyone,
Generally,
Sorry?
you know what people also, generally I've seen what people also do is like just catch exception and that's it. I mean, and then probably throw it, rethrow it, or print a message or something. Uh, Although it's okay in some cases, but in many cases, I feel that probably the actual exception, probably if you catch it, it could help uh, in printing exact diagnostic message and you know what the actual problem was.
Correct.
That's very true. A lot of times the programmers they also they have blank exception handlers. They have a catch
Yes.
statement. They'll say catch exception is so that it catches all type of exceptions and then you do nothing about it.
Yeah.
And the
Yes.
person might be debugging the code, literally pulling out his hair and reaching nowhere. Literally, I've seen that happen so many times.
Yes, that happens.
Right.
And even though it happens a lot with the junior programmers, it also happens with the senior programmers as well.
Correct. Correct.
Yes. Okay. So now that everyone seems to have woken up, let's move on to the finer details of using the try, catch, and finally. So I have a set of questions here. So let's say we have a finally block and we have a catch block, and both of these blocks includes a return statement. So do you think both? So do you think the return statement, as soon as the return statement is executed in the catch block, will the control go to the finally block?
Yes, it
Yeah,
would.
I
Yes.
think the
Yeah.
finally block statement would still be executed.
So what happens to the return statement?
It will happen after finally.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Before the control returns from a method, the code executes the finally method, the finally block, sorry. So the control is not transferred. A hold is put on the transferring of the control and the control waits for the execution and completion of the finally block. So this is a
I have a
classic,
question. Mala, can
yes,
you stop you? Uh,
yes,
like,
yes,
do
please.
we know how Java handles this internally? Does Java initiate a different thread for like exceptions and then return back to the original flow when the finally and the catch blocks are executed?
Because if we talk about the internal working in terms of spawning another thread, I believe that should be specific to a particular implementation, but as such, the specifications do not mention that. And as you know, the JVM is implemented um, system specific for each operating system. So that depends on the implementation, but the Java specification, the JVM specification does not require it.
Okay.
Okay, so we move on to the next. So this, because this is a classic question which is asked in the OCA exam. So in my book also, I've taken this image from the book. So that gives you an interesting way to remember the rule that even if you have the return statement in the catch block, the control doesn't return to the calling method and it still executes the finally block. So here we are comparing the buying of the diamonds. We are comparing the coffee with the finally block, and we are comparing buying diamonds with the try block. So if we have an exception or return statement in the catch block, the finally statement still executes. So in the exam, I don't know whether have anyone of you written any Oracle Java certification?
No, haven't.
No, I
No.
haven't. No.
Okay, so the exam requires you to remember a lot of points, and as you read through the topics, those points can become overwhelming because you have to remember so many things. And the when you write the exam, when you answer the questions in the exam, you are not allowed to access the Java API documentation or the Java compiler. So the code which you can easily determine, if I run a piece of code on my system, I can easily determine whether the code would compile or not, whether it would throw an exception or not when I run it, when I compile it. But when I write the exam, I don't have those privileges. So I have to remember all those points. And working through those many points can become overwhelming. So this is one of the main reasons for including images like this. So the images they help you to allow a point to stick to your brain. So that was the main point of using images like this. So moving on. Okay, so we do have conditions when the finally block won't execute. It's like when the application terminates, or you have fatal errors. If you drop your system, if you turn it off by you hard boot it, excuse me. So those are the conditions when the finally won't execute. So if we go back to the real-time examples that we have, if the person, let's hear about this conversation, if you have an earthquake or any other natural calamity, then the coffee treat would also be not complete. So that's how you could compare the conditions when the finally block won't execute. Okay. So what happens if both a catch and a finally block they define return statements? Oops, I already have the output here.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, in this case, the return in the exception block is kind of irrelevant when the code straight away goes out from a finally block.
Yes, that's right. Because it must execute the finally block. The value 10, which is returned by the catch block, is not returned, and the value which is returned by the finally block is actually returned to the calling method. So this is another classic question, an example of a classic question that you get in the real exam, the OCA Java AC7 exam.
So
Okay, now I have.
like rejected by the the JVM, or like how it will happen? Because we have two return statements now. Wouldn't it be a unreachable code, or it would be a reachable code?
No, it won't be an unreachable code because if you define code in a class which is unreachable, the code doesn't compile. If you try to insert a statement right after this return statement, let's say if you have a statement say int I is equal to 10 right after this return statement, then try to compile your code, and the compilation error message that you get would be that your code includes unreachable code. But in this case, the code is not unreachable. It's because, first of all, we don't know, as we talked about the river rafting example earlier, if the degree of the rapid is greater than 10, only then you will encounter an then you will fall off the raft, right? So when exceptions are thrown during runtime, only then you can get to know the actual flow of code. Then you give this code to the Java compiler, it cannot determine whether an exception would be thrown or not, right?
Right.
And because it has to execute the finally block, it would, and because it also includes the return statement, it would return this value. So it's like you can compare this the value which was not returned from a method, you can compare it to an instance which is not referred by a variable. When I only say new string and brace and then colon, I am not referring this instance with any variable. So this value is not being referred. So that won't be referred to as unreachable code. Do I make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Great, great. So now we only have a couple of, I guess only one or two questions left. So I won't take long. So another question is, what happens if finally block modifies the primitive value returned from a catch block? In the previous question, we had return statements in both catch and the finally block. In this, we are adding an additional step, and in the catch statement, I say return a value which is a primitive type value, and before I do so, I use the finally block to modify the value which is being returned by the catch block. So what happens here? Does the value returned by the catch block, can you see the modified value or the original value, and why? Anyone?
Actually, we can see the answer, but couldn't make sense out of it.
Okay. We talked about pass by reference and pass by value in Java, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. So when the catch block is about to return the value of a primitive variable, it has already copied it to a place in the memory. And when you try to modify the value of the mm, of this variable, it is actually modifying another copy and not the one which the catch block is trying to return. So the statements are one statement is returning a value and the other statement is trying and modifying the value of a copy of that value. So this is the reason why the modification of the value in finally block won't affect the value which is returned by the catch block. So
Okay.
I have one slight modification in this, when instead of the primitive value you return a reference variable and you return an instance. So what happens if a finally block modifies the instance value returned from the catch block? I have the same arrangement, but this time the type of return value is string builder, which is a class, and in the finally block, you modify the value of the instance being returned. So in this case, the memory has the address of the value which is being returned. So when finally modifies it, it modifies the same value. So when the main method, the execution of main method completes, it gets the value by which adds the appends the value 10 to the initial value. So the return value is now 1010 and not only 0. So that's again pass by value and pass by reference. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
Great, great. So I guess we are almost done. This is the last question for the session. Now we talk about the order of the exceptions in a catch block. Do they matter or don't? Yes, they do. Because you cannot catch a base class, instances of a base class before instances of the subclasses. You can compare this code will not compile, and the reason is let's uh, let's talk about an interesting way to remember this rule. Let's say we have a line, and the door 1 that the line passes through has the tag animals only, and door 2 has a tag tiger only. So when this the tiger passes through door 1, because it's an animal, it would enter the door 1. It won't care to look at the other door which was meant only for tiger. So the same thing happens here. Because file not found exception is a base class of IO exception, file instances of file not found exception would be handled by this one. So because this would uh, become unreachable code, this would never be reached, and so the code wouldn't compile. So the order of the exceptions that you catch matters. So that's an interesting way to remember this rule. And this brings us to the end of the session. And this is what you are supposed to have learned in the session. I know it can become very boring to go through all the points one by one, but I guess we should be okay. So now I'm ready to answer the questions that you have.
Uh,
So Mala, first of all, I mean, it was very enlightening because exception handling generally when we talk to people, it may not look one of the most glamorous aspects of the Java language. But what I really like in this session, and in fact in your books also, I've seen the way you use infographics and images and your examples. They are very thought provoking and very interesting. They kind of can create interest in anyone. So in fact, in
Thank you.
this session also, some of your examples are really really cool.
Thank you so much, Guppreet. Thank you so much. You made my day.
Yeah, actually, I also really like to um, say that whenever you compare the any situation with the images, that actually struck in your mind forever. The image is actually
Very
stored in
true.
your mind. That thing actually I liked about the your book, and also the O'Reilly books also actually have the same type of concepts. On each and every O'Reilly book, they used some sort of images, and so that's the best way to write the book.
Yes, I completely agree that a picture is worth 1,000 words,
Yeah.
and it can actually make you remember a lot of things, which, as I said earlier, you need to write an exam like this, where the number of points that you have to remember is can become overwhelming.
Hmm.
Thank you so much, Jitendra.
Yeah,
Thank
most
you so
welcome.
much.
And I think because you were having a question, I think you have typed it in your chat.
yeah, I was like confused earlier as well, like where we should use if blocks and where we should use exceptions. Uh, like if we try to compare it in the sense of execution cost, which is more preferable. Like we had an example in the session as well. It like the size of array. Should we use the if block to check like if the length is correct or not, or we should leave it to the exception handling rather?
Okay, then because that's a very good question. and that actually depends on the requirements. Let's assume that you have a method in which you have an array, and you check the length of the array, and if you think that let's say we talk about a real example, when you try to execute your Java class using Java console. When you do that, you need to pass the name of the class to the Java runtime. And if your main method accepts some arguments, then you need to pass them with the name of the class separated by a space, right? And
Right.
within the class within the class, if you try to access those values which you are passing to the method as command line arguments, if you need to operate on those values and if the user has not specified them, then that's an exceptional condition. You can report back to the user, you can throw an exception, you can say that, listen, I wanted 3 argument values, but none has been provided, so I cannot proceed with my execution. On the other hand, you could have a method where you say, okay, the user has not specified any values to me. Let's say we are talking about establishing a database connection, and the user is supposed to enter the username value, the password value, and the connection string. But when the user doesn't, then you might use some default values, right? So in this case, you might not throw back the exception. You might continue with the execution of your code. So the logic that you use actually commands the usage in your code.
But it is nothing related to like exceptions are consume more execution or like more memory or internal stack than if blocks. Like, is it a myth like we should not use exception for the cases where we can use if blocks?
No, not at all, because if you talk about the execution, the extra time that you talk about, we have high speed processors nowadays. So if you are talking about uh, some thousands or millions of seconds, part of a second, that doesn't make a difference. What is more important is that the code that you write is readable, the code that you write is maintainable, and the code that you write does the work it's supposed to do. And as you know, with the increasing speed of the processors, that a part of a second doesn't matter if it actually makes a difference. Because again, the the specification do not mention anywhere that if you use exception handling, it would take a lot of processing time, extra processing time. That is not mentioned.
Okay, thank you. I have another question, like how we should use the exceptions if we have multiple statements. Like we had another example in which we were we were handling the exception for one statement,
Mm-hmm.
but we clubbed 2 or 3 statements after that in the same if block, try catch block. So how we should do that? It's if it's nothing related to the business logic we want to implement there, uh, because in that example the flow of information could have been the same if we have used only.
I'm sorry because I guess I've lost you now. I can't hear you now.
Okay now.
Yes, oh, you're back again now, but I guess I missed last sentences.
Okay, let me repeat it. Saying, the
Because
statement.
the connection seems like it comes and goes, and I can't make out the statements.
Vikas, can you write in the chat window?
Sure, let me try that.
So is the attendance usually this low in the sessions that you have, or is it better?
Actually, that depends on their requirement, their preferences, the attendees.
Okay.
Because normally, what we learned so far is like the number of attendees they actually say that we are going to come to attend this particular session. I think 10 to 20% attendance would actually come to join that particular session. So, and I think the our jug is also growing in terms of actually the active members. So we are actually looking for the active members as well. And there are some desperate users, desperate members as well. They actually, even though they leave the country, they used to join the each and every session. Today he is not present. I
I think
think he would come back again and saying that, oh, I actually missed that session. So I think that's the thing.
so. If we check our pages, Facebook page or Google listing and all there, there are many users or members in that.
Yeah.
But then the actual percentage is little less because I think clicking a like button is very easy for people. Like you're browsing
Correct.
Facebook and then they
Correct.
feel the page is good, they click it. They remark on our comments also. I can understand that. Uh, in fact, initially when we started this group, we wanted to have physical meetups, face-to-face kind of thing.
Yes,
But we
I
thought
think
that let's have
that's a
a
good idea.
yeah. We thought that let's have a critical mass of meetings and then we can go through that. Unfortunately, we have not had that critical mass in our virtual meetings also. So we thought it's okay. Let's continue with the virtual format for some more time. So I guess that, and I guess probably we did not had a session for our group for quite some time. That could
Yeah.
also have been the reason why we are seeing
Okay.
this. But actually, the many people who registered for this event also, but I don't see them today.
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes, I have.
12, I
I
think
also
12
saw
or
a
13
count of,
people.
I guess, yes, 12. Yes, that's right.
12 or
That
14.
excludes me.
And I think 6 or 7 people on the Facebook as well.
Okay, oh no, I only checked the meetup web page. Okay, so now we have the question by Vikas. He says, should we club the statements in try block even if they are not supposed to throw any exception? Mm, okay, you mean to say that if login to your account, this statement does not throw an exception, should you include that within this try block or should you take it out from the try block? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great that now I understand the question. Um, because let's say you take it out from the try block. So what happens now that you already know that this procedure or the statement is not going to throw an exception, it's okay to have it here because as you know, if the statements that precede the statement and that follow the statement, if they throw an exception and this statement is clubbed is sandwiched, sorry, between these statements, then you'll have to define separate try blocks for the statement number 1 and the statement number 3, right? Because as you
Right.
know, these might throw the exceptions. So it would be quite cumbersome to write the code. The code won't be so readable. And if you have a try a separate try-catch block, then if access the blogging website throw an exception, then what happens to login to the account step? Should that execute outside the try block? That also depends on the dependency between the statements that you execute. If login to your account cannot happen if you before you access your website, so am I making sense?
Mm, I think again this is again some myth I heard, like we should use only we should minimize the statements in the try block, so that I don't know, again the execution thing, execution time will be better, or uh, we should not put unnecessary statements in the try block. I think again this is a myth.
No,
I
that could
think
be
this may be a myth only.
Okay.
no, because
Another thing,
this,
which
yes.
sorry, please carry on.
No, you carry on. I was just trying to explain the same thing, so please carry on.
Yeah, so I mean, another thing, which I used to probably recommend to people, was that generally when we have situations when there can be null pointer exceptions,
Mm-hmm.
so if you don't catch it, obviously your application will terminate. So generally people used to do a null check and then, have the code in order to make sure that there is no exception or error, coming out. So I used to kind of think that probably it's better to have, a try catch with a catch of null pointer exception, because you take, the 80-20 rule kind of a thing, that null check is going to be valid only 20% of the times. So the exception handling cost would come only 20% of the times. Whereas if I use the if block, I have to incur the if check, every time, 100% of time. So it's an overhead. But then, I saw, in the recent, the Java 8 specification, they have come out with the optional, interface and all that stuff. And if you see their sample code listings, they say that, okay, if you have a attribute or a class or an object, you suspect it to be, null, you can encapsulate into optional or null kind of a, interface, and then do an if check and something like that. So now, I mean, I don't know, is the Java world people, are they kind of trying to encourage using if checks rather than, catch blocks or what? But it seems the optional, interface is tending towards that direction.
That was good input, Gupta. I appreciate it.
Just a thought I was, sharing with you all.
Yes.
Some sort of weird noise is coming.
That's my system getting some funny
Oh,
voices now.
okay.
Okay, there was one last. Let's see. There was one last point that I wanted to mention, because as you just mentioned that neither of you has written a Java exam. If anyone comes for a suggestion to you, never recommend. It's for you also, and if you are passing that suggestion to someone else also, a person who is new to learning a programming language like Java, should never try to learn it by using an exam study guide. You can compare learning to program with learning how to drive, and earning your exam, the Oracle Java exam, with clearing your driving test. Let's say when you're learning how to drive, if you try to overwhelm the person with a lot of instructions, you don't have to turn the key that way, you don't have to turn the steering that way, look into the rear view mirror, do this, do that, the person will not learn how to drive. You need to take a chill pill when you are trying to learn something. But when you're actually going to appear for your driving test, then yes, you need to know what the examiner is going to ask you, and a lot of do's and don'ts that you need to take care of when you go for the test. The same thing applies to writing your OCA Java exam or preparing for the OCA Java exam. Like in my book, I have a lot of do's and don'ts. Like if you declare a variable, this might happen. If you initialize it, this might happen. So a lot of people, they write to me stating that they are trying to learn the language using this book. So I would recommend that to anyone. I would recommend learning a programming language using an exam study guide.
Okay.
Okay, so on that note, I would thank you all for listening to the session and for your time. Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
appreciate
So
Thanks.
thank you, Mala, for this enlightening
it.
session, and wishing you the best for your future books.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Vicky. Thank you very much.
All the best for that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot,
Thank
guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Chandra.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Gupta. Bye.
Bye.
And